Okay, so you've given us these articles on grief and coping with loss,
Yeah.
from Choosing Therapy, Calm, and even the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly a topic that's, that's on your mind.
Right.
And it looks like you want to go beyond just like the surface level advice here.
Absolutely.
You're looking for some practical strategies, I think, and maybe even a deeper understanding of what grief actually is.
For sure. Ah,
So that's what we're going to be doing in this deep dive.
that's right.
We're going to be going beyond the basics,
Yeah.
hopefully uncovering some of those kind of hidden, insightful nuggets from these sources,
Yeah.
and help you to better navigate loss, whether it's something you're going through yourself or you want to support someone else.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really cool about these articles is that they all emphasize that grief is so much more than just sadness.
Yeah.
It impacts us, emotionally, physically, even cognitively and behaviorally.
Yeah, it's interesting how Calm puts it. It's like a roller coaster, they say. Like, 1 minute you might feel okay,
Right.
the next minute you're totally overwhelmed.
Exactly.
That's totally normal, which is, I think, really reassuring to hear.
Definitely.
What really stood out to me, too, is that there's no right way to grieve.
Yeah.
You might find yourself grieving very privately,
Right.
while someone else might be very expressive about it.
Totally.
And that's okay.
Yeah, grief is such a personal and individual experience. And your sources actually highlight that there are different types of grief.
Okay.
So you've got bereavement,
Yeah.
which is kind of what we typically think of when we hear grief.
Yeah, when someone dies.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you also have things like anticipatory grief,
Mm-hmm.
which is grief that we feel before a loss even happens.
Oh, interesting.
Like when someone is, say, terminally ill.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's complicated grief,
Okay.
where the intensity or the duration of the grief really disrupts someone's life.
Uh-huh.
And then there's ambiguous grief.
Ambiguous grief.
Okay. This is when there's no clear closure, which can make it so much harder to process.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, think about situations like missing persons cases.
Right.
Or even dementia, where a loved one is physically present
Uh-huh.
but mentally absent.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's really tough.
It's interesting how the sources talk about the famous 5 stages of grief.
Yeah, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Right, but they're really careful to point out that it's not like a rigid roadmap
Exactly.
that everyone follows in order.
Yeah.
Grief isn't linear.
It's not a checklist, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And, Calm even adds a 6th stage, finding meaning,
Okay.
suggesting that grief can actually be transformative
Interesting.
and lead to personal growth.
Yeah, I like that.
That's kind of a hopeful perspective.
It is.
So let's get into the more practical side of things.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Because your sources offer a ton of different coping strategies,
Sorry.
ranging from simple tips to some really deep healing approaches. But I think the first thing that jumps out is just the importance of support.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Whether it's grief support groups, leaning on your loved ones, or even finding online communities.
Yeah.
Just having that network can make a world of difference.
I think the Choosing Therapy article was really, really strong on that point. Emphasizing that grief can be incredibly isolating.
Right.
And just having people to talk to or to share memories with or to just be present with can be so crucial.
Absolutely.
It's like a lifeline.
Yeah.
Now, beyond just talking, there are these kind of active coping strategies that we can use.
Yeah, like journaling.
Yeah, journaling is a classic for a reason.
Right.
It's just a way to get all those thoughts and feelings out of your head.
Exactly. Get them on paper.
Yeah.
It's like you're transferring that weight,
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, making it feel less overwhelming, less trapped inside.
I like that.
And you don't even have to be like a great writer or anything. It's not about creating some masterpiece.
It's about the process.
Exactly. It's about processing those emotions.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one is writing letters.
Oh, yeah. I saw that in one of the articles.
Yeah, this can be particularly helpful if there were things left unsaid.
Oh, to the person that you lost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a chance to say goodbye,
Uh-huh.
or maybe there were some unresolved issues, writing a letter can offer a sense of closure.
Wow.
It doesn't have to be, a formal letter or anything.
Oh,
It
yeah.
could just be a note, a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, just getting it out.
Right. It's about expressing what's in your heart.
And then there are, things like art and music therapy.
Yeah, these are often overlooked.
I think so, yeah.
But they can be incredibly powerful because they tap into different parts of the brain
Uh-huh.
than traditional talk therapy.
Right.
It's about expressing your grief non-verbally,
I see.
which can be really freeing for those who struggle to like put their feelings into words.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, it's not about creating some masterpiece.
Right. It's about the process.
Exactly. It's about the process of creation itself.
That's really interesting.
And then, of course, there's self-care.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
I know it's kind of a buzzword these days.
Yeah.
But your sources highlight why it's so crucial during grief.
Right.
Eating well, sleep, exercise.
The basics.
Right, they might seem basic.
Yeah.
But they're essential because grief takes a toll on the body.
Yes, it does.
It's not selfish.
Sure.
It's about giving yourself the strength to go through this process.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, what we're seeing is that coping with grief isn't just about feeling better.
Right.
It's about providing yourself with the resources, emotional, mental, and physical, to process such a profound experience.
It's not about getting over grief.
Exactly.
It's about integrating it.
Yeah, it's about integrating it into your life. It's a part of you now.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It's amazing, really, the sheer variety of ways that people cope with grief.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no one size fits all.
Right.
And I think that's so important for people to keep in mind because, sometimes you feel like you should be doing certain things or feeling a certain way. And then you feel even worse.
Right. Exactly. So let's get into some of these different coping strategies.
Okay. Yeah.
And why they might be so effective.
Sure.
We touched on journaling a bit earlier. What is it about putting pen to paper that can be so helpful?
Well, I think journaling offers a way to kind of externalize that storm of thoughts and feelings that's going on inside, right? It's almost like you're transferring that weight onto the page.
Oh, yeah.
Making it feel less overwhelming, less trapped inside.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's not about perfect grammar or profound insights or anything. It's about the process.
Yeah.
It's about the act of releasing those emotions.
You mentioned writing letters, too.
Yeah.
Which can be particularly powerful when there are things left unsaid.
Right, exactly. If you didn't get that chance to say goodbye or if there were unresolved issues, writing a letter can offer a sense of closure.
Wow.
And again, it doesn't have to be, a formal letter.
Right, just a note.
Yeah, it could just be a note, a stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's about expressing what's in your heart.
And then you have those creative outlets like art and music therapy.
Yeah.
These are things that maybe aren't talked about quite as much.
I think so, yeah.
But can be so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they tap into different parts of the brain than traditional talk therapy. So you're able to express your grief in nonverbal ways.
I see.
Which can be very freeing, especially for people who find it difficult to articulate their feelings. And again, it's not about creating a masterpiece.
No, it's about the process.
It's about the process of creation itself. One thing that comes up a lot, especially around holidays and anniversaries, is this idea of creating new traditions because the old ways of celebrating just might not feel right.
Right.
So it's about finding ways to honor the person's memory in a way that feels authentic to you.
Exactly. Maybe it's starting a new tradition of volunteering.
Oh, okay.
On their birthday or cooking their favorite meal and sharing it with loved ones.
Yeah.
It's about keeping their spirit alive while acknowledging that life has changed.
And speaking of change, it's so important to remember that grief doesn't have a timeline.
Absolutely. There's no set schedule for getting over it.
Right.
And comparing your grief journey to someone else's can be so detrimental.
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone grieves in their own way and at their own pace.
Some losses take longer to process than others.
Right.
And it's totally normal for grief to resurface even years later.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder that grief is a part of life.
Yeah.
It's something we learn to live with.
Yeah, rather than get over.
Exactly.
Your sources offer a lot of advice about supporting others who are grieving.
Yeah.
And it can be so hard to know what to say.
Right.
Or what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the mistakes that people make?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes is trying to fix the situation.
Oh, yeah.
Or offer platitudes.
Right.
Like, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
And while these statements are well-intentioned, they can actually be quite dismissive.
That makes sense.
So what can we do instead?
Yeah, how can we be truly supportive?
Often the most powerful thing you can do is simply listen.
Okay.
Be present. Let the person share their feelings.
Yeah.
without judgment. Validate their emotions instead of trying to offer solutions or minimize their pain.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, I know how you feel.
Right, which I've definitely said before.
Try something like, that sounds incredibly difficult.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
It's about acknowledging their experience and letting them know that you're there for them.
And it's okay to not have all the answers.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes the best thing you can offer is just your presence.
Right.
And your empathy.
Yeah, and it's crucial to remember that everyone grieves differently. So what might be helpful for one person might not be helpful for another.
Right.
It's about being sensitive to the individual's needs and being patient.
Because grief is a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. It's not something you arrive at and then it's over.
Now, another thing that stood out to me in the articles is that self-care is important.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just for the person grieving, but for the person supporting them, too.
Yes, because supporting someone through grief can be so emotionally draining.
Right.
So it's essential to make sure that you're taking care of your own needs.
Yeah, to set boundaries, to take breaks.
Exactly.
Do things that bring you joy.
Right. And it's okay to seek support for yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If you need it.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
So let's get into some of the specific advice that your sources offer.
Yeah.
Dana Farber, for example, has a section on making difficult decisions after a loss. And they advise against making any major irreversible decisions in the first year, if possible.
Yeah, because grief can cloud judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
They suggest making a list of pros and cons.
Oh, that's good.
To help weigh the options.
That's practical.
And they also talk about the importance of planning ahead for holidays and anniversaries.
Right, those big occasions.
Exactly. Those emotionally charged occasions that can be so difficult.
Yeah.
They recommend talking to your family about how you want to handle those days.
So everyone's on the same page.
Exactly, so that everyone's on the same page.
I like that.
And, it's okay to create new traditions.
Yeah.
If the old ones just don't feel right anymore.
Right, right.
It's about honoring your loved one's memory in a way that feels good for you.
The Calm resource has some interesting perspectives on different types of grief, especially ambiguous grief.
Yeah, where there's no clear closure.
Like with a missing person.
Yeah.
You were talking about that earlier.
And they highlight how this lack of closure can make it even harder to process because you're constantly in a state of limbo.
Wow, that's tough.
They also talk about anticipatory grief.
Right.
The grief you feel before a loss even happens.
Like when someone's terminally ill.
Exactly.
You're grieving a future that...
Yeah, you're grieving the future that you thought you'd have.
Yeah.
And this can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I bet.
And then there's this idea of finding meaning in loss, which comes up in several of the sources.
It does. It does.
It's a powerful concept.
It is.
It's not about saying that the loss was a good thing, right?
Wait, yeah.
But it's about finding a way to grow from the experience.
Yeah, to learn from it.
To honor the person you've lost by living your life in a way that would make them proud.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to make their memory a positive force in your life.
We've been talking about grief in a very serious way.
Yeah, it is a serious topic.
It is. It is.
But it's also important to remember that, there can be moments of joy and laughter.
Oh, for sure.
Even in the midst of grief.
Right.
And allowing yourself to experience those moments is not disrespectful to the person you've lost.
Right.
It's actually a way of honoring them by continuing to live your life to the fullest.
It's a reminder that life is precious.
It is.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Before we move on,
yeah,
I do want to touch on the importance of seeking professional help.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that can be a really important step for some people.
There's no shame in asking for help.
Right.
If you're struggling to cope with your grief,
yeah, a
therapist can provide you with the tools and the support that you need to navigate those complex emotions. And there are also support groups available.
Oh, right.
Both in person and online, which can be a great way to connect with others who understand what you're going through.
It's about creating that space where you feel seen and heard and understood.
Exactly.
You can learn from others who've walked a similar path.
One last thing I want to emphasize is that grief is a journey, not a destination. It's not something you get over.
Right.
It's something you learn to live with.
Yeah.
And it's a part of what makes us human.
I like that. as we wrap up this deep dive into grief and loss, I keep coming back to this idea of maintaining a connection with the person who is gone.
Right.
It's something that Dana Farber talks about, that even though someone is physically gone, their presence can still be felt.
Absolutely.
They even offer some practical suggestions for how to do this.
Like what?
So they suggest things like creating a memory book or a photo album, or just sharing stories about the person with others.
Yeah, that's good.
And I love how they even talk about using technology.
Oh, interesting.
Like converting old home movies to DVDs.
Right.
Or saving voicemails.
Yeah, I love that.
These are such tangible ways.
They are.
To keep someone's memory alive.
Especially for younger generations.
Right, who might not have had as much time with them.
Exactly.
And then they talk about embodying the person's values.
Oh, wow.
What did you learn from them? What were their passions?
Yeah.
How can you carry those forward in your own life?
Those are powerful questions.
They are.
To ask yourself.
It's like even though their physical presence is gone, their legacy lives on through you.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
It is.
One type of grief that I think deserves more attention is disenfranchised grief.
Disenfranchised grief.
So it's the grief that's not always acknowledged or socially supported.
So like what kinds of things?
So, for example, the grief you might feel after a miscarriage.
Oh, okay.
Or the loss of a pet.
Right.
Or even the grief you might feel after a divorce.
Yeah.
These are all very real and painful losses.
They are.
But they aren't always given the same level of validation.
Right.
As other types of grief.
Yeah.
Which can make it even harder to cope.
Absolutely.
It's so important to remember that your grief is valid, no matter the source of the loss.
It is, yeah.
And to seek support from people who understand and will validate your experience. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Absolutely.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways.
Okay.
First and foremost, grief is a journey, not a destination.
It's not a race.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Right.
And it takes time.
It does.
Be kind to yourself. Seek support when you need it.
Yes.
And remember that even in the midst of loss, there's still room for healing.
Absolutely.
And even growth.
And one final thought to ponder.
Yeah.
Several sources touch on the idea of maintaining a connection with the person you've lost.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
That's a good question.
How might you keep their memory alive in a way that feels meaningful and helps you to move forward?
That's something we can all reflect on.
It is.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into grief and loss.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it helpful and insightful.
We do.
Until next time.